Illiterate Manga Club.
Hey yo, welcome back to Illiterate Manga Club. It's your boy, Grassy Knoll Nick. So yeah, I just finished a little manga, which, obviously it's a little early, I only just finished it, but I'm pretty confident in saying this one has cracked into my top 10 favorite manga of all time. It's a manga that feels so right up my alley and so kind of like made for me to kind of appeal to stuff that I'm interested in. And it is also completely cracked out of its gourd insane. Like, this feels like the kind of thing that you would come up with as like a joke, but not actually do anything with. But no, it's real and it's genuinely excellent. So Billy Bat is a manga about a manga in the story called Billy Bat. You can essentially think of Billy Bat as being sort of like a hybrid of Mickey Mouse with a little bit of Batman thrown in there. But otherwise, he's supposed to be essentially just kind of an amalgamate of 20th century cartoon characters. One day, the author of this comic, Kevin Yamagata, learns that there's a suspiciously similar comic in Japan. And so Kevin makes a trip to post-World War II Japan to try and learn if he may have accidentally plagiarized Billy Bat. Although it may seem like a sort of simple, pretty low-key concept, what awaits you in this manga is absolutely baffling. As Kevin dives deeper into the mystery of the bat, he learns that he's not the first person to draw this character, far from it. As not only does the character appear before certain chosen people, he also imbues knowledge of future events upon these people, albeit in very roundabout sort of ways. So even if the base plotline sounds interesting, I think what makes the story really special is the fact that it kind of skirts the line between being sort of a almost historical drama about the 20th century, while portraying a sort of alternate history and taking a lot of real-world people and just messing with them ever so slightly. For example, one of the sort of inciting events of the story is what's known as the Shimoyama incident. And this is a real event that actually happened in Japan. Is the president of the National Railroad Company, like, his dead body was found on some train tracks. And the sort of official story is that he got hit by a train, but most people are convinced that he actually got murdered. So even though the event still happens in Billy Bat, the how and the why of it is totally different. So that sounds cool to you, you gotta check this out. This is one of the best examples of a manga essentially taking sort of like real world events and just twisting them around just enough to where history essentially plays out the same, but the events leading up to it feel very different. And speaking of standing out, I think one of the sort of most interesting things about the manga is how it feels like it's written almost from like the perspective of a Western person. Since even though at the beginning the story takes place in Japan, the majority of it is spent in kind of the mid to late 20th century America, and as a result, it has a lot of kind of like themes and events that are very America specific going on. Features a lot of things that you probably don't really see basically at all in Japanese media, like the Kennedy assassination or the civil rights movement or 9/11. And so it definitely feels like it was written by somebody who has a particular interest in 20th century American history. And the manga is actually a collaboration between Naoki Urasawa and Takashi Nagasaki, with Urasawa also doing the art. I've been meaning to check out more of Urasawa's works. This just so happened to be the first one of his that I read, but obviously I've heard of Monster and 20th Century Boys and Pluto, and now that I've read Billy Bat, I definitely want to go back and check out some of his other stuff, because I thoroughly love this one. And so yeah, the focus on especially 20th century American history, I think it definitely gives it a sort of flavor that you really just don't see in a lot of other Japanese media. Obviously, I'm not saying there's nobody in Japan who's interested in American history. I'm just not sure how much topics like the JFK assassination are like interesting to the average Japanese person. I'm sure people in Japan are pretty aware that JFK got killed, but, it's uncommon to see stuff like this explored in such detail in a Japanese series. And since I'm a big fan of both history and conspiracy theories, this manga was an absolute delight to read. I mean, it's all here. You got your classics. You got the JFK assassination. You got the moon landing being fake. I wouldn't say go into it expecting it to be a manga about conspiracy theories necessarily. It's more like, what if you put a bunch of random historical events and figures and kind of put them in a blender and throw a little bit of Xanax in there for good measure? That's basically what Billy Bat is like. And since it is sort of a historical manga, many real people do appear in it, like Martin Luther King Jr., JFK, Albert Einstein, Adolf Hitler, and of course Lee Harvey Oswald. And as I said, the manga does something kind kind of interesting where it likes to sort of play around with these historical figures. It basically asks the question of, what if there's things about these historical figures that we're not entirely right about? For example, one of the most major characters, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but one of my favorite characters of the manga is Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald is possibly one of the most, like, contentious and debated about human beings ever. Everything from his political allegiances to his own history, his motivations, whether or not he actually did it. You know, all these things have been debated about for more than half a century at this point. And Billy Bat does something really interesting with him where it makes him out to be almost a sort of sympathetic good guy. You know, I don't want to spoil too much about what happens, but it's the sort of thing where now that I'm done reading the manga, I kind of look back on real history and think, damn, what if, you know? What if Lee Harvey Oswald was actually kind of a real one? And even though a lot of historical figures appear, most of the main cast are original characters. For example, our main character, Kevin Yamagata, is a great lead and fits really well into his sort of fish out of water role. You know, he was just a dude trying to draw a comic book, and then, like, the characters started talking to him. And one of my favorite things about Kevin, and actually a lot of the characters in the story, is the fact that they're artists. For whatever reason, I tend to gravitate towards artist characters, even though I'm not an artist myself. There's just something very human about being an artist. I don't know. I think just the act of striving towards greatness in something subjective like art is really appealing to me. You really get to see the trials and tribulations that Kevin goes through, being whipped around and essentially psychologically tortured by knowing about future events and having to make the choice between being exposed to the horrors of the future, all while thinking he's going insane because a bat character is talking to him, or to try and just live out a life in peace away from it all. Definitely my favorite female character is Jackie, who's a second generation Japanese American. She is also able to communicate with Billy Bat and ends up getting wrapped up in a funny little event that took place in Dallas. Another one of my favorite characters who doesn't show up quite as often is Kotaro Akechi. He's essentially meant to be a parody of Ishiro Honda, the director of Godzilla. And I think one of the strongest things about the manga is just all the various characters' relationships and how they kind of connect to each other. They all feel very connected. There doesn't really feel like there's any sort of stray pieces in the equation. Everybody either knows somebody or is a relative of somebody or played a major role in somebody else's life, and you never quite know who's gonna end up where. I ended up being genuinely concerned about a lot of these characters' fates. And when it was all said and done, when I saw some of them for the very last time, it almost brought a tear to my eye. Since although I think the sort of immediate selling point of the story is how just completely insane it is, how it's a sort of weird historical drama, but in some ways things are a little bit kind of fucked up. Like, I'm dying to talk about some of the big twists of the story, but I think y'all should really go and read it and kind of experience it for yourselves. But underneath all that, there's actually an incredibly well-written, very emotional story. Some of the most prominent themes of the story are fate and good and evil. And it's sort of an interesting view into the human experience and the choices that make us what we are. And one of the most consistently reoccurring problems that characters face involve choices. Good people who have chosen to do evil, bad people who end up choosing to do good, those who regret the past and would do anything to go back and change it, and those who fear for the future and would do anything to change that. I think if I could describe the overall theme of Billy Bat in 2 words, they would probably be, what if? Since the whole manga is essentially centered around this idea of what if. What if you could change the future? What if you could change the past? What if you decide to do good? What if you decide to do evil? What if our understanding of history is wrong? It's a very dense manga. You definitely spend a lot of time discussing the themes and sort of the philosophy of it. If there is or isn't a particular message that the story is trying to imbue into you. Although it's fun and sometimes terrifying to think about the what-ifs, as Albert Einstein once said in the hit manga Billy Bat, you can search every universe and there aren't any other Earths. The here and now and how you choose to live your life, that's what's important. It's about the choices that you make in the future that you want to have. You know, it's pretty serious stuff for a manga where Lee Harvey Oswald dresses up as, like, basically Mickey Mouse. But I don't know, I think in a way that's kind of the beauty of it, is the fact that a manga with such a ridiculous premise and events in the story that are so out there can still manage to be genuinely meaningful and have a lot to say about just the human experience. If you're into weird, hokey, sort of what-if history kind of stuff, then this manga's right up your alley. If you like interesting characters with a complex web of relationships, this one's definitely worth checking out. If you're into stuff that leans on the more philosophical side of things, Billy Bat's got you covered. It kind of just has it all, man. Like, I think this manga is excellent. Like I said, it's definitely sort of cracked into my top 10. I love this one. Please consider checking it out. It's great. But yeah, that has been another Illiterate Manga Club. Thank you all so much for joining me. In the comments, let me know what your favorite conspiracy theory is. I'm sure YouTube won't delete any of those comments. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.